Jeff, when I hear you talk about this, I think of the Tina argument, there is no alternative. Now, obviously, one answer is Tina is the answer. There is no alternative. We'll
Right.
just basically continue to do what we're doing, even though it's bad, it doesn't work. Another answer could be, well, the crypto bros, we're going to work on making a kind of alternative crypto system. We'll use stable coins to kind of bridge from one world to the other. There's real world financial assets that are now being tokenized. That's another potential bridge. But in some ways, the cryptoverse is kind of working on this plumbing. Where do you think we're going to go? Are we going to try to, jump from a moving car to another moving car? Are we going to stay on the Eurodollar system until something breaks? Where do you think we're going in the future?
Yeah, I think the first part is true. What you just said, Ben, is absolutely true. We're kind of stuck here, and it is a solution for the short run, although the short run has turned into 2 decades. However, it's not a workable solution because whenever you have the old saying I use is that when economic growth, the rate of change in the economy goes down, rate of change in politics goes up. And the longer the rate of change in the economy stays down, the faster the rate of change in politics becomes. In case you haven't noticed, that's kind of where we are in the 2020s. So in many ways, we can't really stick with the Eurodollar system, even though nobody's working on its replacement specifically. I mean, yes, some cryptocurrencies fancy themselves as the reserve currency of the future. We won't name any names here. The truth of the matter is cryptocurrencies, which should be the natural bridge to the next ledger money system, because that's what a Eurodollar is. It's nothing more than a dispersed ledger where the ledger is kept by, banking cartel. There's all sorts of negatives associated with that alone, beside the fact that it doesn't work the way that it did before 2007. I mean, because the banking sector was the only way to create this global reserve ledger system, it allowed the global cartel of banks that operate its enormous political, financial, way too much power. You don't want to have that kind of power in the hands of banks to begin with. Yes, it was necessary because they were the only industry available with the resources and the specialized expertise to pull off something like this. So yeah, they were good in the 1950s when we needed the solution to Triffin's dilemma, which wasn't really a dilemma because they solved it. So yeah, we needed banks back then, but we can move beyond banks. We have the technology in blockchain to operate ledgers. What we lack is the expertise to scale them up to the size and scale that we need for a global reserve currency system, as well as make them robust enough that they can be used in a reserve currency fashion. So while there is some potential from cryptocurrencies and more so blockchain, it's still way, way down the road. We're several iterations away from actually undertaking and equaling the Eurodollar's capacity, let alone surpassing it. So that's potentially a future. And stable coins are an extension of the current Eurodollar framework because, like you said, Ben, it's probably the best way to put it. They're tokenizing some real world assets and financial assets together to put them into a ledger framework. But in many ways, that's just kind of a half step into the future, and not necessarily doesn't necessarily represent a full step into the next stage of evolution, which I think we should be moving toward to begin with. So in many ways, the cryptocurrency phenomenon is a response, even though a lot of cryptocurrency enthusiasts don't know this, it was a response to the Eurodollar breakdown. I mean, they all think that the Fed's printing money. We need to protect the value of the dollar, protect the value of savings. Instead, what they created was another form of store of value financial asset instead of a workable currency system, which is what they were supposed to do. That's where the cryptocurrency revolution really went. Even if people didn't realize that's what they were doing, they were trying to solve the Eurodollar problem without understanding the Eurodollar was the problem that they were trying to solve. And in many ways, that has hindered their evolution because they've been looking in unproductive directions. Like I said, Bitcoin, perfect example. Bitcoin, the white paper from Satoshi says a peer-to-peer payment system. It wasn't supposed to be a NASDAQ stock, but it went over to become a NASDAQ stock because they were thinking they needed to protect everybody from the Fed's money printing rather than trying to work out how to create a Eurodollar alternative, a useful, widely available, widely acceptable Eurodollar alternative. And there's arguments about whether or not they could ever do that with Bitcoin, but that's a separate thing. So I think in many ways, cryptocurrencies took a couple of unproductive directions, and then stable coins kind of brought it back toward the direction we need to, which is, a payment system. But still, like I said, they're a couple of generations away before even coming close to challenging and recreating what the Eurodollar actually does, even when it does it poorly.
So, Jeff, someone might be listening to this conversation and say, wow, this guy Jeff's really smart, but
Yeah.
I just don't get how this matters to me. If the Eurodollar system breaks down in Dubai or the rest of the world, how does that affect me? How should I position my portfolio for some Eurodollar shortage or some dollar issue that I don't really understand? It doesn't affect my day-to-day life. What should I be doing to potentially, guard my portfolio or guard my wealth from the things that Jeff's saying?
Yeah, the first argument, the counter argument along those lines is look at the stock market, right? You said the economy's been in the toilet for 20 years. So how's the stock market at all-time highs, right? Where there seems to be a disconnect here. And the answer to that is the downside isn't necessarily the stock market having a bad day or a bad month or a bad year. The downside is the stock market continues to soar to new highs as the socialists take over in city after city after city, state after state after state. Because eventually what we're talking about here at the end of the day is an economy that doesn't function. And the reason why socialism has become popular is because the economy that we have today looks a lot like what Marx warned us about 150 years ago. It doesn't function the way it should. Therefore, it kind of makes a crazy man and Karl Marx look like he knew what he's talking about. And therefore, you've got everybody on the other side saying, look at the stock market. Look at how great everything is. This system works really well. And a lot of people, and there are way too many people who are struggling saying, what the hell are you talking about? This economy sucks and it has sucked for a very long time. And here in the 2020s, it seemed to have somehow gotten even worse. We went from millennials living in their parents' basement because there were no jobs to now those millennials living in their parents' basement have zero hope, zero future, and they can't even afford to live in the basement. So the downside here isn't necessarily a portfolio or the stock market or assets. The downside is much bigger than that. It's structural, it's systemic. We are losing the system that we have because nobody's making the argument that we can get out of the situation that we're in. It's a two-pronged problem here. The first problem is we don't have nearly enough jobs because the economy has been stuck in a depressionary condition because the banking system won't create credit, won't create money, won't circulate money. Then for everybody turns into, rather than risk takers, which an economy needs, everybody just plays it safe, except for the private credit people who just go off into a bubble situation. So it's none of it is productive. So we're stuck in this unproductive loop year after year after year, decade after decade, which leads to economic decay, and it's worse around the rest of the world. Why did we have the great migrations in the 2010s? Yes, there were political developments that came along with it, but the reason why everybody wanted to move out of the global south is because suddenly the future that they thought they were acquiring in the 1990s and the first half of the 2000s just simply disappeared. Where did that go? It's gone. I mean, Brazil was doing well and some of these emerging markets were on their way, and then it just kind of turned off. So the issues here are much bigger than strictly the stock market or portfolios, though. I mean, there are absolutely some spillover there in financial context. But the argument here is much bigger than that. It's the systemic argument. It's politics, and it goes beyond strictly financial markets and financial prices. The portfolio that performs in one economic regime can get crushed in the next. So in this free webinar, we're going to reveal what those four economic regimes are, how to identify them, as well as the assets, historically speaking, best positioned to perform in every environment. So reserve your seat now and learn how to prepare your portfolio before the economy shifts again.